Charles had held senior roles at SAP, Salesforce, Microsoft across markets of Asia Pacific. Basically, he is a veteran, although he looks quite young in the HR and technology space. So over to you, Charles.
Vitaly, thank you so much. It's very kind and warm introduction. I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me relatively clearly. It's a very significant pleasure for me to be here with all of you today. I think that whilst the agenda was fairly clear on what we're going to cover, I probably will run across a gamut of different topics related to this theme around searching for talent and searching for skills as it states predominantly in emerging markets. But one of the areas that I also want to maybe peel back and unpack with you, given the fact that my understanding of this audience is that it's primarily made of HR professionals, HR practitioners, is to give you specifically some tips, some tricks, some ideas, as well as some successful practices around how to prepare your own departments, your own businesses, and I'll be so bold to say prepare yourselves for this new world of work that we're navigating in, particularly given the fact that we're all experiencing what I would term as a polycrisis point in time. We look back on the pandemic, obviously, as kind of a seminal moment for shift in, I would say, expediting or catalyzing a lot of the change that we're experiencing in the marketplace. But I would suggest to you that that's just been one sort of macro impact of several different, quote unquote, crises that have hit us. The war in the Ukraine, economic challenges in Sri Lanka and other parts of the world, political disruptions, et cetera. So we need to have a different approach and a different sort of set of tools and a different sort of framework for how we actually look at these crises as opportunities to evolve our businesses. And indeed, it is the case that regardless of what vertical you're in or what industry you inhabit, the prolific need to have a very strong plan and a very strong level of acumen around how to search for, how to acquire, how to retain, nurture, and grow talent and skills is singularly the most important aspect of any business that's out there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Granted, we started a little bit late. It's going to be hard for me to wax lyrical with you on all the various things we could discuss, in 20, 25 minutes. But I will give you some highlights. And as I said, I will also go into a little bit of detail around, how to prepare yourselves and your businesses with regard to, the HR function as a whole. So one of the key elements that I stated in the notes that I shared with my partners at PeoplesHR at Synod was around this idea of really focusing your efforts to invest in brand equity. And let me peel that back a little bit and give you a little bit more saliency around what that means specifically. So these days, as I'm sure you're all aware, we've actually gone through, and I would suggest to you not just in sort of the Asia Pacific region, but broadly across the entire world, we've gone through a remarkable period of volatility, specifically related to the shifting, I would call it, I don't want to call it a power struggle because that makes it sound super dramatic, but I guess the balance of power with respect to decisions being made in relationship to employment. What do I mean by that? I mean to say that the power kind of shifted away from employers dictating the rules around these relationships with employees. And by employees, I mean to say not only full-time employees, but also with respect to contractors. And during the course of the pandemic, and I would suggest even like maybe 6 months, so 2 quarters, 3 quarters after the pandemic began to subside, we saw with the Great Resignation, which I hate that term, it's so cliche, but there was a wave of people voting with their feet. And if you look back on that, and I want to sort of unpack that a little bit with you, because that wave of resignations, that wave of people sort of reevaluating their position, is actually a really unique opportunity for your business and for you as an HR practitioner. And why do I say that? I say that because it was emblematic of a phenomenon that every individual on this call and every individual that you know to some degree experienced. And that was that the great sort of democratization of impact. Granted, many people suffered far more than others with respect to the impact of the pandemic. And I don't want to trivialize that in any way. But what I'm suggesting to you is that everyone was touched by the the sort of global scale and the disruption that were outcomes of the global pandemic. And as such, many people were confined to their homes, and thus their personal lives and their private lives became intermingled in their home. And as a result of that, people really had, this sort of moment of reflection. And what that moment of reflection did for many people was it kind of forced them to question whether or not the work they were doing was valuable, whether or not the work they were doing actually matched their own priorities as individuals. And it actually fostered a lot of people to not only leave their businesses, because the answer to that question was that it didn't match, it didn't live up to their expectation. But moreover, a lot of people started to migrate. A lot of people started to say, once the doors opened for the various countries, a lot of people packed their bags and they left. As a matter of fact, in many countries, just before the pandemic started to close stuff down, people started to pack their bags and go abroad. And I think it's very clear for those of you who are, joining us today from Sri Lanka, for the past 4, 5, 6 years, particularly, there's been a tremendous amount of immigration for Sri Lankan talent leaving the market and going into markets abroad. And that's created a lot of urgency, not only from the macro level, at the government level, trying to ensure that there's enough of a wealth of talent accessible by businesses to encourage their growth, but also as a result, a challenge with respect to the ability to attract inbound foreign direct investment. What it has also fostered, however, and as evidenced by the fact that you're all on this call, is a realization that because we were all able to work remote in many instances, again, not everybody is an information worker, not everybody's working with computers, in a cafe. Lots of people in the service industry, manufacturing, agriculture, et cetera, have jobs that require physical presence and physical contact in a domestic environment. Having said that, where it is relevant, where there are businesses and roles that could be disseminated into a broader environment, we realized that could be done. And as a result of that effect, people started to realize that if I can do this job and kind of deliver value in my room, maybe you're in Gal and not in Colombo as an example, or you're in, Pondicherry instead of Mumbai. Well, why can't that same job then therefore be done in another jurisdiction altogether, where the constraints become less about geography and more around maybe time zone or language, and thus things became even more sharply put into sort of focus with respect to your brand, the platform that your business stands upon, your ability to adequately and accurately attract people to your system, to your values, becomes absolutely paramount and critical to your ability to stand out. And what's exciting about this is that for those of you who are in businesses that are either startups or small businesses or even medium businesses, because the playing field has been almost made even by virtue of the fact that if the whole globe is your talent pool, you have a unique opportunity to tap into the talent pool the same as a Google or a Microsoft or an Intel or what have you. So bearing that in mind, the critical differentiator is your ability to kind of increase the visibility of your brand and what your brand stands for. Now, to put that into sharper context for you, a sharper sort of contrast with the past, I would venture to say, I would hazard to guess that many of the businesses that are represented today in this call have not had the opportunity, perhaps, to sit down post-pandemic and post the war starting in the Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and the dramatic fallout and impact from a global economic point of view, to step back and look at, hey, is our business today on the same mission that it was on 10 years ago? We have the same vision for what we want to accomplish as a company, and have our values remained the same, or do they need to be evolved to match the current environment we're operating in, the current circumstances? I.e., again, to repeat, our mission, vision, and values, have they remained stagnant, or do they need to be revisited? And the reason that this is important is because today, talent that's out there, regardless if it's an emerging market or a mature market, if it's in South Asia or Southeast Asia or Africa or LATAM, the talent is looking for businesses that extol the same types of values, the same types of vision that they have as individuals. It is imperative that you look for these sort of key elements, and I'll give you some statistics to kind of help you sort of ponder this. It is stated fact, I think it was the LinkedIn talent survey from last year, that if, I think it was 54% was the statistic, that employees said, 54% of employees said that they didn't feel valued in their company, they would walk. Now, what's very fascinating, you've seen this successive wave of layoffs that have happened in the technology space over the past 36 months, particularly over the past 12 to 18 months. And in that wave, there are a whole host of extremely impactful, extremely valuable talent that are out there in the marketplace. Yes, they're looking for salary and benefits and things of this nature, but very importantly, they're looking for diversity in the businesses that they will work for. They're looking for favorable policies like hybrid ability to work from home as well as work from an office. They're looking for a whole litany of different sorts of feature sets that you as a small employer, a medium employer, or a large employer can build into your vision, your mission, and your values, create a brand around that, and go out and engage with these employees, with these candidates and with these employees all over the world. There are platforms out there, as we know. We're talking on one right now, right? I'm speaking to you, live from Singapore on Zoom. And Zoom is a perfect example of a company that has been able to, leverage a technology platform, but also a culture to run a completely globally remote business. And it's proliferated, all over the world, as you all know. So brand equity means, putting in place a culture around engagement. It means putting in place a very clear new definition around job descriptions, around things like not only skills and competencies and tenure, but the types of characteristics that you want to associate with your brand, particularly in a remote environment. What do I mean by that? In a remote environment like we operate in today, and particularly for you companies that are looking in emerging markets to hire talent, you might not be present in those markets. How do you ensure that the skills and the individuals that you're engaging with are going to be able to be successful in your environment? One of the key models that I will advocate for you to consider is a model that I call DICE, D-I-C-E. And let me break it down very quickly for you. The D stands for finding candidates that can exhibit a high degree of determination. Give me some examples of how you've overcome obstacles. Give me some examples of how you, have, changed the course of a disastrous decision in your business and course corrected to, overcome and ultimately be successful. Show me determination. This is a critical piece because people operating in an autonomous environment and a remote environment have to be determined. They have to be able to overcome doubt and obstacles like pandemics as an example. The next piece is the I in DICE, DI. The I stands for insights. And insights is the following. Today, we operate in an environment that is just proliferated. It's flooding with information, TikTok videos and Zoom calls and Google and, Chat GPT. It's just crazy how much information is coming at us all the time. How do you find the signal in all of that noise? How do you take all of that information and synthesize it and distill it and condense the nonsense and come out with insights that you can share? Give me some examples of that. That's the I. This is predicated upon the C, which is curiosity. Show me that you want to learn. Show me examples. Share with me ideas around how you constantly are trying new things or, new businesses or, taking classes online or whatever you're trying to do to show me you're curious. What are you reading right now, etc. So determination, insights from information, curiosity to learn and try new things. And the last is the E, and this is really critical. This is your ability to engage. Can you show me ways and means by which you are able to engage with different stakeholders and show empathy? Empathy is critical. I can manage up with my execs and my critical stakeholders, and I can also manage my peers and my relationships with my peers. And I also am respectful and can, reach across the aisle and work with people at every level of the organization, every culture. If you think about this model, this DICE, this is agnostic to geographic culture. This is about your company culture. This is about your company brand and your job descriptions, your vision, your mission, your values. If you align all those things, if you plan properly, you will absolutely be as competitive in the marketplace as any other company out there. Part of this that I'm discussing with you happens to come down to this idea of, a human touch. I think that it's very easy for us to forget. And I talked about it in that DICE model, the very last letter, the E, which is that empathy. You really have to understand that top talent will leave your company because they don't feel valued or they don't feel that they're part of something that's bigger than they are. They're not feeling valued. They're not being engaged. I highly encourage you to, continually explore ways and means by which you can, overcome the obstacles of time and space to truly get a workplace culture that is built upon trust. So what I mean by that, you need to create spaces where people can learn from each other, can listen to each other, can foster a sense of understanding about their team members, about their colleagues, constantly be going out and trying to get feedback around what they need, what they feel, what they see, bringing in guest speakers that can focus on diversity and inclusion around the world, elevating, voices within an organization so they can have a kind of a piece. I'll give you some examples. In my company, in Globalization Partners, we're now called GP. That's our brand now. In GP, we have something called a shadow board. And the shadow board is we come up with projects and we go around the business, around the world. We bring in some people and we say, we want you guys to own this and, work as a team to collaborate and bring back some ideas and some solutions around this particular business challenge. And we basically tell them to be entrepreneurs and build their own business model inside the company and come back to us with a business case. And if it's a good one and we can all kind of agree that it's a way to take the business, we make investments and those folks run that internal business. They become kind of the stakeholders in that business. That's a phenomenal opportunity to get people who aren't necessarily in leadership positions. You tap into their expertise. You're providing resources for them to get involved. Building that trust and transparency, it's very difficult, but you can do this in a remote environment if you yourself lead by example. Now, I'm not going to go, deep into this topic per se, because I know the point of this discussion was around talent in emerging markets. So I do want to call out a couple of points specific to that topic. One of the areas that I think a lot of companies, drop the ball on, miss out on, is the fact that historically, emerging markets were viewed as places that were tapped from a talent point of view for low-cost labor arbitrage. So you went to these places, you kind of came in and you trained them and you coached them to become, base level to where your expectations are in your home country. And you did it because there was a cost element of efficacy for your business. Those days are over, right? Low-cost labor arbitrage is not a driver for expansion in hiring talent. Today, it's about talent arbitrage. Many countries around the world, Sri Lanka as an example, Australia as an example, Singapore as an example, Japan as an example, where there's a dearth of talent in a particular area, and if you in your mind are confined to just that domestic market, everyone's fighting for the same finite amount of resources, you can't survive. And what has been amazing, in 2021, Oxford Economics came out with a report that stated for the first time in history, the E7, so the top economies in the emerging markets, outperformed the G7, which is the classic sort of developed OECD G7 markets, in terms of 35-year-olds or below at college age who had a university degree. It was 52% of the global pool of talent in that E7 versus G7 talent pool. So for the first time in history, the balance has tipped to emerging markets for a higher degree of ambitious, well-educated, hungry, ready to learn, ready to work, entrepreneurial mindset, university-educated talent. So if you're not focusing on that, you are missing one of the greatest opportunities in the past century to outmaneuver your competitors and not only find talent, but with that talent in place in a local market, a unique opportunity to expand into those markets with local expertise. So that's something that I wanted to point out. If you want to know about specific markets where you can go and specifically find the right types of talent and what the rules are, et cetera, I'm going to give you a resource at the end of our discussion in about 2 minutes that you can go to and tap into. Clearly, you're going to have to also, as you go down this path, have a really robust hiring process in place. And what that means ostensibly is that you need to understand what part of the HR functions are most commonly outsourced versus which part of the HR initiatives need to be kept in-house. You need to have a proper plan, right, ready to go. You need to understand what the in-country laws and in-country legislations and in-country compliance environments are like. It's critical and very important that you understand how to manage data and how to have local employment contracts, navigate the local sort of statutory requirements as relates to social benefits and labor taxes. And that's where people like PeoplesHR, Globalization Partners can come in as a partner and help you navigate that and even provide local vehicles to do the hiring, et cetera. There are a myriad of different ways that you can do that, but you must plan. My father used to tell me when he was alive, one of my favorite phrases that I never forgot: proper preparation prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. So properly prepare and plan, and you will not have a bad performance. So don't neglect these processes. These things that seem mundane are really, really important. And I mentioned this already. I'm talking about the compliance challenges. If you mess it up in any of these countries, you not only lose your talent and your resources and your effort that you've made, you can get fined. You can even have significant issues that can be legal issues for you or your business. So I talk about it here to some extent. We talk about probation and terminations and severance when it's appropriate. Sometimes certain markets have expectations around supplementary benefits. Understanding what the median sort of salary ranges are for the country that you're focused on is going to be absolutely critical. And I would suggest you want to do at least 3 or 4 triangulations around salaries and salary packages and benefits packages from various sources. And guys, you can get all this stuff online. It's not difficult to find. You need to take most of the data with a pinch of salt unless you're talking to an expert. But if you go out and do your own due diligence online, plus minus 5%, plus minus 3% across 4 data sources, you should be able to find a median average. And then to start asking people in those markets, what the market bears, and do your own, process of elimination due diligence. All of the various accoutrements that I put in here should be fairly straightforward for you, understanding culture, understanding time off, sort of expectations in those markets, local holidays, working hours, et cetera. I'll end here because we're 2 minutes over, albeit we started a little late. But if you go to PeoplesHR website, you'll certainly see a lot of information about the services they provide as a business. If you go to GP's website, which is g-p.com, we have a section called Globalpedia. It's free for you to use. There's no tracking. We're not going to like ping you and start spamming you with anything. Globalpedia is there. We're present in 187 countries around the world. And in that Globalpedia, you can click on a country and start to do some one-stop research around what are some of the rules, cultural norms, hiring practices, legal considerations, regulations, benefits, et cetera, in each of those markets. I highly encourage you to reach out locally, wherever your market is, to the local chambers of commerce and have some conversations with them about what the talent landscape is like within their respective countries. I also highly encourage you to reach out to the top 3 universities in each of those countries and have conversations with them about what types of career fairs they have, what types of startup incubators they might be running. And then lastly, I would highly encourage you to reach out to some venture capital or private equity funds within those countries and talk to them about the ecosystems that they support and learn a little bit more around what types of talent opportunities that they see, as well as talent challenges that they face. So you can start to build a map of where the best idea is for you to place the flag for your next episode of trying to attract, hire, and retain talent. So I know that was a little rushed. I could have gone on for an hour. I will put notes together and share them with my friends at PHR, and they will get those to you. With that, I'm going to stop and see if there's any Q&A and turn it back over to you, team from Peoples. I think you're on mute, Vichalya.
Sorry. Thank you
No
so
worries.
much, Charles. That was insightful. And this is us trying to wind down PeoplesHR Tea Talk with Charles. We do have a few questions coming. So I'll just read it out, Charles, so it's
Sure.
you can just answer. You spoke about what the talent is looking for. However, how open are companies for hiring remote talent or allowing majority of the employees to work remotely? Management across the globe, most parties requesting employees to come back to work. Of course, this is for a number of reasons. However, what will that type of request result in? Do you believe that the future of work is remote and that companies will have no choice but to facilitate at least part-time remote work to capture the best of talent?
So it's a great question. It's highly accurate because there is a massive push to return to work, return to the office. I don't think anybody was not working, but I have perhaps a classic MBA student answer, and the answer is it depends. My premise would be, if I were to sort of future gaze into my crystal ball, the future of work is choice. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's not an all or nothing decision for a company. You can't be 100% remote necessarily. Some companies can. Sometimes, by the way, in case you don't know, it's a regulation requirement that you have an office. It's like Japan as an example. We have my company is 100% remote, but we do have offices in some countries where it's statutorily or regulatorily required. In terms of the impact of like working within an office versus working remotely, my counsel to the businesses on this call and anyone that I speak with is you have to empower with choice. Now, what does that mean? That means obviously you need to have some days which are office days and some days that aren't office days. And you need to have a flexible schedule that allows for the individuals to make determinations around what works best for them. I think you're going to find that quite a number of particularly younger workers might opt to go in to the office. A lot of social connections are made. A lot of office romances lead to marriages and children. A lot of lessons can be learned by you know, the mentor relationships that you have with people who are tenured and kind of role models that you can, you know, follow and look up to and get coached by, et cetera. And by the way, let's flip that narrative around just for 1 second. A lot of younger workers teach us old folks a lot too. Yeah. So it's not like just because you're a senior in the company that you know everything. In fact, often it's the case that the younger workers know a lot more than we do. So, you know, I appreciate the compliment that you gave me at the beginning of the call, Vichalia. But, you know, as a young man in his 50s, I can tell you that I learn a lot from young workers every day. They're teaching me stuff about the way things are operating these days in the world, right? And you can't always get that remotely. You need that interaction. However, if you mandate anything to anybody, you better be prepared for the consequences. And the consequences, if you say you have to come to the work in the office or you don't have a job, is you're going to lose talent.
I think I agree. And there's another question, Charles. This is a more of a legal related question.
Sure.
It says with a lot of people working remotely, not as freelancers, but as full-time employees while working remotely, there are many who take on freelance work on the side. What are the legal implications here in terms of conflict of interest and making sure your employees are not working for competitors or a related place?
Look, it's a great question. I think it's been put into sharper focus because of the situation, right? If you're not there watching people, you don't know what they're doing. It's come to a point now where we have, you know, objectives and key results. So the performance management is based on outcomes, not on attendance. You know, if you can get the same stuff done from home in 10 hours that you can in 40 hours sitting in a cubicle, and I can watch you do it, you know, shame on me for not being more efficient in the way I manage my people. As it relates to the legality, I would repackage the question and put it back to the person who asked the question, which is the following. How do you know that the people that work for you 40 hours a week, 5 days, you know, during the course of the week aren't working for your competitors and freelancing on Saturday and Sunday, you know, or pulling late nights at the competitor next door? You know, you don't know. And unless you bug them and put chips in them and track them with GPS, you don't know, and you're never going to know. So that comes down to the legal verbiage and the clauses that you put into their contracts and your ability to enforce those around non-competes, around IP protection, et cetera. And I would further add that in a remote environment, if you don't have an entity in the market where you're hiring the talent and you're concerned about IP protection, about non-competes, and about enforcement, you should be working with an employer of record like GP who puts those pieces directly into the contract and has the rules in place legally compliantly in every country that they operate. Or you should be working with a really reputable law firm who can help you to design locally specific contracts. One contract that you write for your employees in Sri Lanka is totally irrelevant outside of Sri Lanka or India or Mongolia or Tanzania or America. You can't enforce a labor contract outside of the jurisdiction where you've issued the contract. There are macro clauses that can be enforced, but at the local level, you must have a locally compliant labor agreement. And so therefore, you know, the extent to which you can enforce the conflict of interest, IP protection, non-competes in a contract is predicated upon the laws and the rules of the country where you're hiring. But the person who asked this clearly is thinking the right thoughts, because you have to be planning these things out in your hiring process and in the instruments that you use to engage. Last point I would make on that is it's infinitely easier to enforce the areas that this individual is concerned about with an FTE, a full-time employee, and that could be with an employer of record or through your own structure, far easier to do than when you're using freelancers, contractors, and gig workers. So, you know, you run the risk of misclassification and permanent establishment risk when you don't use full-time employee relationships. So bear that in mind as you go forward, regardless of market.
So Charles, I think a little bit on that. Now, moonlighting is very common, right? So which is what we call, you know, doing some other work on the side. So now there we have a lot of HR audience today, So just to understand, do you think right now, post-pandemic era, during remote working, is it necessary for HR to have a policy documented on how, they're going to address moonlighting and to have these processes in place? Because this is going to happen, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is inevitable.
Absolutely, I think it's important. Let me just very quickly for the HR audience give you some quick pointers, okay? The way forward in this disrupted environment that we're operating in from an HR perspective, let me give you a list. So you need to design, document, and as soon as you can, execute a strategy for a comprehensive program around upskilling and reskilling your workforce. Number one. Don't even think twice about that immediately. Number two, you need to design, document, and execute as soon as you can a comprehensive program around health, safety, and wellness. These are critical areas for the well-being of your employees to maintain their engagement with you and their mental health in the world that we're operating in. Number three, you need to design, document, and execute a program of training for leadership around EQ and remote team management. Why do I say that? Just because somebody's the CEO and has been the CEO for 25 years doesn't mean that they understand how to operate in today's working environment with dispersed remote teams and the importance of empathy and high emotion quotient, the EQ. They need to be trained on that. People don't just wake up with osmosis and know what to do, okay? You need to create a competency framework around skills beyond the job. And I talked about that a minute ago, right? Resilience, collaboration, agility, psychological safety. This is for your line managers and your leadership. You need to focus on digitizing and automating as much process as you possibly can. You need to revisit your rewards and recognition programs. You need to refine your work from home, policies. You need to make sure that you align your HR policies with your IT policies. So how you track people, how you ensure ergonomics, single sign-on security, cyber risk, etc. And frankly, and this is for my HR friends, you guys have been put through hell over the past 36 months. You've been, psychologists and nurses and, practitioners and strategists and triage and everything in between. You need to get HR functions some love. They need to get some mentors, some coaches, some partners, some training for themselves. All those things being said, as it relates to the point that you raised, the question that you raised, you do need to document. If you have a policy or an area of concern that's keeping you awake at night, it's making you paranoid, if you don't document it, you can't enforce it. So the answer to the first question is yes. The ramble that I just gave you are stuff that like table stakes for the new world of HR. You used to be administration and personnel. Now you're the strategic differentiation for a company. You need to own that. You need to step up.
Thank you, Charles. And I do agree. HR, professionals are very much overwhelmed because they actually do take in a lot. It's like, they had to take in a lot as well. So we have a couple of more questions. As much as you don't like the phrase, the great resignation, it is something that has happened. And very interestingly, with mid-level management in their mid-30s, taking the chance to leave work due to burnout and other reasons. Many of them are now freelancers or have joined different industries. What does this trend do to the experience within the organization as they have taken a wealth of knowledge away from them?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, I highly encourage businesses to document as much as they possibly can, digitize as much as they possibly can. When the talent walks out the door, I mean, what does it do? It destroys your business. So you can't, when the tide goes out, you have to wait for the tide to come back in. You can't get the water, glass by glass and pour it back on the beach. So my counsel to the businesses listening would be, work on retention programs, work on knowledge capture, and furthermore, if it's domain expertise, you need to have mentor and mentee programs and relationships inside of the company, right? You need to be constantly focusing. I mean, I think the first thing I said to you with respect to sort of HR, programs to be comprehensive on is upskilling and reskilling. So where you have these, experts, you need to be leveraging them and empowering them to be coaches and mentors and sort of skills trainers as much as they are, managers or leaders, mid-level managers inside the business. The other thing I would suggest to you is, kill the idea of age being the determining factor for success. Ageism is over, right? Youthful workers, Generation Z, and baby boomers and above workers both have extremely high degrees of value to provide. And when you connect the two generations together in a constructive way, you get a phenomenal amount of accelerated value in knowledge sharing, et cetera. But you've got to find ways and means by which to capture that. Somebody walks out the door with your IP, they're gone. I would strongly advocate also you should remain open-minded about boomerang employees, because there's a hell of a lot of, the great resignation, which I said I don't like and I still don't like. There's also the great regret. There's a number of people who walked out the door, and now that the power has swung back into the hands of the employers rather than the employees, because people need to keep their jobs these days, because the recession is here. Interest rates are at an all-time high for over the past 10, 15 years, since 2008, great financial crisis, when we dropped, we had free money on the table for the past 20 years, right? 13 years. I would suggest to you that you really need to not take advantage of that position, but you need to be open to the fact that people are going to have regrets about leaving, and you need to bring them back into your business.
Thank you, Charles. And I agree with you, digitizing and automating most of these functions makes life easy for HR people, and that's where PeoplesHR comes in. We make all things HR easy and easy to digest by automating. So we have 2 more questions. I'll quickly run them with you, Charles, as soon as you're done with the call. So yes, I'm gonna.
Sorry, we're 20 minutes over, and I've got a conference call waiting for me. I apologize. Why don't I answer these last questions
Yes.
Through text? And
Sure.
with that, let me give my thanks to everyone who joined. It's a pleasure to be able to share some ideas with you. Hopefully this was valuable. And yeah, I'll be back in touch with PHR to give you some more detailed notes, which you can share with everyone who joined.
Thank you so much, Charles. The session was quite insightful, and to our audience today, we thank you for joining us, and do let us know. So we wanted to try a quick tea talk session with Charles today, but if you do want a longer session on any other topic, we are definitely willing to do that as well. So let us know your comments, thoughts, any other areas that you want us to dive into. We will be willing to do it in the near future. Thank you, Charles. And this is me, Vichalia, signing off from PeoplesHR. We will be in touch with you all. Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.